Hello everybody and welcome to the Frank and Stan chat, and this is episode 119. I'm delighted to say those of you that are watching on the video cast will see we've got two guests, and for those who are listening on the podcast, I can tell you we have two guests. So welcome Bryn LLewellyn and Alun Davies. We'll introduce them to you. They'll give them a chance to tell you what they're about and what they've been up to. I think we're going to find it. This is an area that actually we haven't covered before, so I'll just leave it there hanging, so that you actually have to listen a little bit longer to find out what it is. So, Stan, how are you this morning?
Good. It's a Sunday morning, and you've managed to get me out of a wedding fair today by changing to Sunday. So,
Frank and Stan chat, the show that keeps on giving.
Yeah. Congratulations, Stan. We weren't aware of that.
Well done. Okay, let's go to Bryn. Do you want to, Bryn LLewellyn, do you want to introduce yourself?
As a young male teacher in a primary school, you became the PE lead by default. And then it was a case of deputy head, acting head teacher in various schools, mostly in Bradford in West Yorkshire. And then I realised that all I was doing was getting children to pass SATs, whether or not it was Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2 or phonics screening. And then I decided to make the brave or maybe foolish leap to do something different. So in 2011, I decided to form Tagtivate, which is a scheme by which we can teach English and maths via the ultimate playground game, TIG or Tag, depending on where you are in the country, or maybe Tag Rugby meets Scrabble and Countdown. And then since then, I've worked with other people to create a community interest company called Move and Learn. So I work and I play with lots and lots of different schools across the UK. And I think I have the best job in the world.
And actually, you're the author, or co-author, should say, of this Move and Learn, which actually they were teaching us. Actually, you can do it that way as well. I only found that out today, even though I've read the book for I don't know how many weeks. But anyway, and I'm pleased to say that hopefully Schools Week will do a review of this book in November. So you'll find out more about it then.
I mentioned that I was a teacher in Bradford and deputy head in Bradford. So this is the Yorkshire connection with Alun. So Alun was a head teacher in Leeds, but we had connections through teacher training college years and years and years ago.
So Alun, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning.
Morning.
Yeah, my CV is far less exciting than Bryn's, I'm afraid. Although I am properly a PE specialist. So trained in PE at Carnegie College, and then taught in Leeds for 28 years. Well, I've taught for 28 years, 24 in Leeds originally, and then I moved down to Suffolk in 2018. And the last 10 years I worked as a head, but from September this year I've then been working in school improvement. And as Bryn says, our link goes back a long, long way. In fact, I met Bryn through his brother. I did my final teaching placement with Bryn's brother, Robin. And then I think the first time I met Bryn was over a game of seven-a-side football, I think. We've maintained that. And I think it's our common sort of link around wanting children to be active and moving that activity into the classroom and making everybody active learners that's brought us together. So, hopefully we can talk a little bit more about that today.
Yeah, so one of the important things here, I think we were in the prelim to this when we were sort of just chatting things through, was this is not about this is about physical education, but it's not physical education in the way that many people would view it. This is not something that's confined to, say, 2 half-hour lessons in a primary school a week. You know, this is a fully immersive sort of experience, isn't it? This is an approach which can affect every single lesson in the school.
Absolutely, it's a culture, and actually, although I come from a PE background, my sort of real passion for this side of learning and the creative learning comes more from a pastoral approach, from working with children who find learning difficult in a traditional sort of style classroom, and really see the benefits. And my philosophy all comes from early years practice, and actually wanting to see more elements of early year practice going through schools, and I think that's hugely important. I mean, it's sort of just diverse a little bit, and I had a conversation this week with a head teacher who was talking about his year 1, and I was quite proud to show me that they did continuous provision in the autumn term in year 1 but by the end of the year, they'll be more like you'd expect a year one class to be. And I thought, well, that how they were in September was how I want a year one class to be, and my year two, element of that in my year three. So yeah, it's just about changing that mindset. We've got sort of this long-standing culture that sort of the September after your 5th birthday, you stop wanting to learn through play and want to sit down and listen, and that's something we've just got to change.
Yeah, and it's trying to get that message across that it's as much about the learning as it is about the movement. So it's not PE and it's not sport. A lot of it's, you know, things that you can do in the classroom as well, just simply to break up sedentary time in terms of how much time do we spend sitting down, and the teacher thinks that they're actually quietly getting on, but they might be thinking about what they saw on television last night or what they're going to look forward to on the playground later on. So it's trying to challenge that preconception that, you know, children learn better when they're sitting down.
Well, okay, well, we'll get on to that because we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the book. So we can do that. Let's try and sort of clip some of these, sort of what's caught our eye this week, if we can. So Stan, what's caught your eye this week?
Excuse me, very quickly then, a piece by Terry Pearson in Sec Ed magazine, which was online, about retrieval-induced forgetting. And it's really about the sort of common practice now, I think, in many secondary schools particularly, is this retrieval practice, the ability to be able to delve into your memory and pick out particular bits of information that you have practiced and learned. And what this article says is that what's missing from this is the other side of the evidence base, the other research that shows that it actually may have a detrimental effect on the other things that you want to remember. And that that's not been pushed in the research for things like Ofsted's framework, etc. So they've only referenced the positive side of it and never referenced what might be the detrimental effect. And the bottom line is, I'll rush this, the bottom line is that if the question isn't exactly what's been practiced and rehearsed, then the other information that the student may well have had is much harder to retrieve than it would be if they hadn't done the retrieval practice on the first item. So it's about balance and nuances in reporting, and like everything else in education, when something comes that everybody jumps on board, it changes and changes and changes until the original research is nowhere near. And it just worries me that we're going down this memory bit, which is obviously related to knowledge and the retrieval of knowledge, and I'm just not so sure it's the way we should be going. We're doing it in order to pass exams. Yeah,
definitely. I agree with that. This is not related to it, but actually, when I start to think this is important, I've got to remember it. That's like the kiss of death on my memory.
Well, you have to quote Homer Simpson on this. The more things, every time I get something new, it pushes something old out of my brain.
I go to the shops. My wife's given me 2 or 3 things to think of. And I'm going, right, I've got to remember this. It's really important. That I'm not writing it down. It's only 3 things. But then I do get to the shops and I can remember like 2 of them. But then I'll be walking around for 10 or 15 minutes saying, what the hell is that final thing? It's only 3 things. And I'm sure it's because I thought this is important. I've got to remember it, you know, that I actually forgot it. There's some triggering mechanism going on in my brain. Anyway.
I think it links a bit to what you were talking about last week, weren't we? You were talking about the skills curriculum approach. And that there is the obsession at the moment. It's about what facts are being taught to children rather than are we just developing good learners? Yeah. And children who, when they're required to learn something, can learn it and get the knowledge that they need to complete it. I think you made reference to it last week, Frank, when you were talking about what employers want. Yeah. And employers, no employers going to want to know detailed history of the UK and dates and facts, but they want somebody who can go into that employment and be trained and have the skills and the people skills and the learning skills to do that job well. And that's what we should be focusing on.
Yeah, it's interesting because they're interested in interesting people.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think reliable. I think that most employers want reliability. You know, they know that they're going to turn up on time. I think most of us would expect that if we were holding a meeting and somebody was always late. You know, I mean, I think so. There is something about, you know, being reliable, but it is also just about just having done some interesting stuff and being able to sort of draw on that and being good. And part of that is being good company, isn't it, as well?
Yeah.
you know.
But having that ability just to learn new things, to apply yourself,
Yeah.
and to take on new things,
And to
I've
be
always said it's
motivated to do that.
absolutely
To be motivated to learn.
good people and good learners. If we can create good people and good learners to send out into society, then we've done our job.
Yeah, I agree. It's easy, isn't it?
Sorted.
Why the hell haven't we started it? Right, Bryn, what's caught your eye this week?
Well, I was so tempted to talk about silences on local radio interviews by certain people. And then I thought we'd have a collective silence on recording.
It's funny though how 2 or 3 on the radio, isn't it? 3 or 4 seconds of silence. It says a lot, doesn't it? Really, it probably says a lot more than the following sort of 2 minutes of words that follow. You know.
Did you see anyway, Michael Fabricant's constituency? They'd done a 30-minute silence, one for every year he'd been their MP.
Sorry, Bryn.
No, it's okay. So let's steer away from that for one moment. Alan and other people who know me that I'm a massive fan of live music. So, for example, the other day, a head teacher in Bradford, Andy Gaunt, another connection there with you. He got in touch with me on Facebook Messenger and said, Bryn, I've got a spare ticket to see another Frank tonight, Frank Turner. So he got in touch and just said, do you want this ticket? It's got your name on it. It's for free. Turns out that he bought 4 for him and the rest of the family, forgetting that his eldest daughter had gone to university and couldn't make it. Anyway, so that was something to look forward to, but something in terms of like this whole thing about music. I love live music. So on Friday, I went to Leeds to the City Varieties, and it's the home of music hall. And just to see Ricky Ross, singer, songwriter, writer, he has a gorgeous book out now, but just the fact that he can sit at a piano or play guitar and play songs from the past and talk about the stories behind the songs, and to hold the audience in the palm of his hand. And I just think, where do you get that ability? And are our children going to have that? Are those opportunities to do so? We talked about narrowing of the curriculum, and it's a case of like, it just reminded me about the importance of music and the arts in general, about why we need it and why we should be doing it in school.
Well, I've got to come in then, haven't I think, because I also went to a gig in Leeds this week. Is it called the Bryn Social Club?
Amazing.
And I went to see 4 American sort of singer-songwriters. It's all acoustic stuff. And they're in their sort of like late 20s, early 30s. And my wife and I thought we were going to be the oldest people there, but well, we were nearly the oldest, but the range went from 80 down to about 12, you know. And what struck me was just that sort of the willingness of a performer to actually sort of give themselves to another performer to enable the performance to be even better, without it being a sort of a desire to show that I'm the best guitarist or I'm the best singer, and that actually it's around that sort of sharing and giving that you offer in performances like that I think is something, a much deeper sort of sense of collaboration than it's teamwork, but it's not just playing your part, but it's giving something more. It's giving something of yourself to the performance, and it's just staggeringly. Oh, also the other thing that struck me: not one swear word in the whole evening. It was just, it was not about that. It was about the purity of the music, the purity of the performance, and the reception from the audience was amazing. And it was great to be back, in a place like that, which is really tight. You feel as though you can virtually reach the performer, so it was really great. I can't wait to go back. They'll be back again in September next year, and I'm determined to be there.
I was at the Brunel not so long back to see Cassandra Jenkins, and she had this saxophonist and a trumpet player, and they were like early 20s, I would suggest. And like at one moment, the trumpet player finished his solo, and the saxophonist just looked at him and gave him a little pat on the back, and smile, and it was just glorious to see that moment of connection. It was just beautiful.
We were at Leonard Cohen in Liverpool at his, obviously his last concert that he did in Liverpool, and they had a break while the other musicians kind of went off and had a drink, and there were 2 violinists playing during that time, and Leonard Cohen stayed on stage and just held his hat down to pay respect to these two.
Wow.
And he stayed on the stage throughout that whole break while they played. It was
Yeah.
real respect for my fellow musicians.
I think the sadness is that, you know, we've all served and worked in communities where, you know, these sorts of instruments are expensive. You can't get less, you can't afford the tuition unless the local authority does it. And hey, there are not many of those that are still doing that, you know, although I went to a school in Liverpool where the Liverpool Philharmonic are actually offering those lessons with the instruments for free. And it was seeing a whole group of year fours coming into school, all carrying their violins and even cellos, you know, it was, you know, took me back that a long way back, you know, but we need to ensure that these
follow up on that, Frank, because the music service in Lancashire used to be in my bit, and you could give a term free to a whole class of various music, but then the school has to take it on further, and it's kind of a taster. But unless there's the income, the money to push it again, it
falls down.
Yeah.
Right. So, Alan, what's caught your eye this week?
Well, I'm not political, Bryn will tell you that, but it is going to slightly into politics, but perhaps the softer side. It was the hype around Gary Neville getting involved in politics this week and the potential of him becoming, I think, in your area, one around you, isn't it, around West Lancashire, and standing, which he has denied he's going to do. So it made me think about raising the question, if you had the chance of putting a celebrity into number 10 to solve all these problems we've got, which celebrity would you go for?
Well, the only person I could think of who actually has got, from the sporting world, who's got that sort of like political angle and is willing to stand up, even though he's probably earning as much as Gary Neville, was Gary Lineker. And thinking that, you know, but there again, you know, that some of this is around just being a very effective communicator. You know, and when I think back to, you know, whether we like it or not, but being able to hold an audience is important. Being able to, I mean, I've just seen current Prime Minister, a bit of it, I couldn't watch all of it. It was just, I found it quite painful, but not a natural communicator. That's the problem. You know, you're reaching out to every community, everybody in the country, you know. I think whether you like Man United or not, but actually you can't ignore the Neville. When Gary Neville's talking, he's generally got something interesting to say, you know, and you feel as though you know where he's coming from. I think that's something that I think you know, some politicians have got that ability. I think Gary Lineker has that. Whether he can hold a cabinet together, whether he can devise a strategy for the run on the stock market, I don't know, but anyway, it's about communication for me. Go on then, Bryn, have you had a chance to think about this?
I'm going to go for someone who's had practice in this already. I'm going to go for Hugh Grant.
Oh wow, that's a good.
He puts stuff out there on Twitter.
He does,
and, as I say, he's had practice already.
Stan, have you had a chance to think?
Yeah, can I have someone who's no longer with us?
Oh yeah, well, there are no rules.
As long as you don't pinch mine, Stan.
Well, because I'd have a coalition of Sir Alex Ferguson and Bill Shankly.
Ooh, we're close.
Ooh.
We're very close then. I was very close to going for Shanks, but I decided there's a couple of reasons why I changed, and I decided to go for Clough.
Right.
Oh,
and I
wow.
went for Clough partly because he was actually very interested in politics, was Clough, and very much in sort of and looking after people. But I thought a couple of the points that you made there, Frank, he didn't struggle in front of a camera, where Shanks was a little bit probably quieter in front of the camera. With Clough, he would have to have Taylor as his treasurer. I think he wouldn't cope without that. But I think probably more importantly at the moment was his record of taking a very underperforming team and making it the best in Europe. And I reckon at the moment that's probably something we could really do with. So for some of those reasons, I went for Cloughie.
Interesting though, we've all I mean it's all down that sporting route though, is it? Apart from the.
Well, there's also Spike Milligan. Because Spike Milligan's theory was anybody in Parliament who has to make a serious, or let's take the mini budget last week, should have to do it with the trousers around their ankles. And then that way you wouldn't be able to be such a depressing place.
Sadly, politicians with the trousers around their ankles a bit too common as it is, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. Well, okay. Let's move on. I've read the book Move and Learn, which is it came out this year, didn't it?
Yeah, just before the summer. Not the ideal chance to share a book with teachers going on holiday, but yeah, it's we've had a soft launch with it, and now it's a case of like, let's try and get as many people interested, not just in the book itself, but in
The
terms of
philosophy.
the whole movement, the philosophy.
Yeah. So I don't know, Bryn and Alan, do you want to do a little bit of a double act here and just sort of give a little sort of potted summary of what the philosophy is?
Yeah, I mean, funnily enough, like Stan's already mentioned this thing about retrieval, and there's so many schools, secondary schools in particular, who've gone down this Rosenshine, retrieval, retrieval. But we kind of like looked at that and thought, okay, we've got early adopters like Alan himself, who saw Tagtivate and saw it and got it, and the impact in terms of children. So we thought, let's look at those people who maybe don't get it as quickly for whatever reason.
Right.
So we looked in terms of different approaches. So we look at like retrieval, collection, bit of modeling, whether or not the modeling is by the teacher or the children themselves. How do the children then connect with each other and their ideas? And then how do they then create solutions? So it's this process of, different approaches. But as well as that, we wanted something that recognized the fact that we sit down too long. And sitting isn't necessarily always the best way to learn. So we've got like different approaches to show the sequence of learning, but also energizers, which aren't brain gym, which I hate the term.
Yeah.
But it's a case of how do we break up the sedentary time with practical ideas for teachers? Because teachers quite often, the default setting is click on a button, play a video, super movers, go noodle, whatever. But ultimately, you've still got kids staring at a screen. So we thought, how many different ways can we get children to move and learn within the process of learning, but also just to re-energize the children, break that learning into bite-sized chunks. So it's like we spent a shed load of time writing it. We spent even longer editing it. Massive thanks to the team at Crown House. And we did some great case studies with people in Yorkshire. Unfortunately, Alan was then working down south in the delights of Suffolk, so he didn't do the case study, but he certainly gets an acknowledgement because he was one of these school leaders who saw it and got it and didn't run away from the idea. Even if there was a couple of wobbles along the way, he had that grit, determination, and resilience to keep on persevering with it and adding his own tweaks and twists. And yeah,
I was particularly interested, and it may be that Alan can develop this. Chapter 6 talks about how you develop this within the whole school, and I think all of us have probably experienced, a colleague as a head teacher has been off to a course. They think they've seen the light, and then they come back, and suddenly everybody's expected to be jumping through a new ring. I'm sure we've all, let me just say I have done that. All right. Okay.
I was going to say, Frank, what about after we'd inspected that school that did fantastic artwork and we both went back to do exactly, oh, that's it, we'll do that.
That didn't last that long, did it? So in a way,
I think I lasted 20 minutes in reception before I stormed out.
So Alan, I mean, do you want to just sort of, you've actually been involved in sort of working with schools recently, haven't you, on this sort of philosophy? So
yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, bringing it into my schools that I've worked in and sort of talking to other schools, and the key thing is, and Bryn sort of mentions it in the book a little bit, it's not about making wholesale changes straight away. It's about, and I'm very keen on that, about making small changes and starting to see the impact of that. And one of the big benefits of this, in terms of bringing change into schools, is that it's really focused on the children. And you can get stuff, and there's very, very few teachers in school who don't want it to be better for children. And I think if you can get that across and the impact it has on them, and as soon as they can start to see those changes to the children, then they buy into it. But it's just about giving people strategies to subtly change their practice or their environment and then start to see the impact. Not dictating how it has to be done, getting away from that message that it is PE or it is going outside and getting muddy, because it's not. It's just about subtle changes in the classroom. It might be the classroom layout. It might be some of the practices you've got in the classroom, some of your expectations in the classroom, that just give children that opportunity to be a bit more flexible in the way they work and a little bit freer in the way they work. And let teachers explore that in the way that they want to do it. So I know when Bryn will talk about sort of when we first started really driving this in Leeds, and And we had a whole contrast of teachers who different things. Our year 3 teacher pretty much emptied the classroom, left half a dozen chairs in there, and then just filled it with bean bags and sofas and children on the floor. And with her class and with her approach, it worked. The year 6 teacher tried that, and it was mayhem.
Yeah.
You know, because again, that's the thing is, well, you've got to recognise that it's really hard to change children who are in year 5, 6 in the way they work when they've been taught to sit down. Where if you start that with reception and bring it through, then you can do that. So it's just about getting people to explore and do it at their own pace, and then bringing together and sharing what's worked. And if they then bring the ideas and share them with each other, that's when you start to get that enlightenment. You know, it comes down to motivation, really, the motivation for themselves to want to make that change. And motivation is perfect, because although my Latin's not great, I went to comprehensive in Manchester in the 80s, so we didn't do a lot of Latin. But motivation really is mean a reason to move, a reason to do something. And so that's a real buzzword that you can use. Give the teachers the motivation to make that change, to get the children moving.
Yeah, and motivation is just one of those 3 elements in terms of motivation. They've got to have the opportunities to explore, and they've got to have the opportunities with the physical environment as well, but also they've got to have the capability to move things forward. And I think the book approach recognizes that. So Ian's a former teacher and head teacher. I've got 25 years in teaching background, and we recognize those things, those worries, those wobbles, those concerns that certain teachers might have. And we think about the long-term picture, and you know, we're doing some fantastic work in Bradford at the moment. So we've got 20 teachers. Sorry, we've got 30 teachers from 20 schools, and they're working with us for the course of the year. And like, had a conversation with one of the schools just this week, and they've set up a working party, and they're doing this in their own time. So they've got one teacher from each year group, and they delivered the first staff training session about moving and learning. And he said it was only then by doing things gradually, and they know it'll be 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forwards, 3 steps back. But as long as the trajectory is heading in the right direction, that's fine. It's about playing the long game. We want instant results, but it's about the long game.
Yeah. Alun?
I think one of the other lovely things about this, which is very, very different to a lot of things that we try and drive in, or we're told to drive in primary schools, is a lot of the time it's related to our outcomes at the end. Where are we getting them for year 6? So much of this is built on good early years practice. And I've always liked to use the early years within school as the real driver and the model for what active learning is. That shows how well our children learn and develop those quality learning skills and emotional and social skills through the way that they learn in such a creative and active environment. And as Bryn alludes to in the book and shows, you know, well through the research, we've got this culture in schools where the older the children get, the more sedentary we make them, and we assume that that's the way that they're going to learn best. And we've got to move away from that and recognise that actually children don't stop wanting to learn through being active after their 5th birthday. They want to carry on learning through that approach, and that whole enrichment of the curriculum. And I know we've alluded to that before. You know, that is about children doing, and not children just absorbing. They've got to do it.
Yeah.
It actually it also allows, doesn't it, other aspects of the curriculum to be considered. You know, I think of I'm a big advocate of dance, and actually, if this culture, you know, you might take a group of children into what we're in a primary school, probably be the main hall, and you do some dance activity, and everybody loves it, but then you come out of that, and you're sort of like putting yourself from a period of real enjoyment where there's been a lot of creativity, you actually going back into the classroom. I've had that feeling where this feels really dull. That sense of where it's predictable. We've got to get changed now. We're going to sit on a chair. We're back doing the stuff that isn't quite as exciting or interesting.
No.
Why are we doing that?
How often does it happen? I'm not saying it happens now, Frank. I don't know what it happens now, but you know, it certainly used to happen in primary school. If you don't behave, you're going to miss PE. Because that's the fun side, isn't it? Or you're not going to do all that until you do your maths and your English.
When I worked with teacher advisors, I had a very specialist PE and dance guy who was absolutely fantastic. And he used to say on the literacy front, how can a child write about creeping and crawling if they don't know the difference because they haven't done either in dance. And it struck me when he said that of how much we need children to be able to do dance, to do drama, to do those things, so that they understand the things that they're reading and writing about.
And a lot of teachers get that, don't they? And a lot of teachers want to do that. And when you're introducing active learning, when you're throwing out ideas and sharing ideas, there are a lot of things that teachers know and they want to do, but they just feel so restrained by the curriculum that they're almost afraid to do them. And it's about saying, do it. Go and do it and give children those experiences.
Parents and carers, though, can be a problem. I mean, I don't mean that in that sense that, they're a problem. They're an important aspect, element of the child's educational journey. But expectations about what a year 4 classroom will look like, is often driven by the fact that children in previous year 4 classes with that particular teacher seem to have got on okay. It's not really, it probably hasn't moved it may not have moved their learning on much, but actually they had quite a pleasant year. So for me, it's around, how do you take the parents and carers with you in this sort of approach, and are they much more receptive than perhaps you'd imagine?
Frank, I did an arts week when I was ahead, and it terrified me. We were doing art for the full week, no other subjects, and I wrote to the parents to say, we won't be hearing readers, we won't be doing maths, we are doing art in groups, mixed groups across the school, and they're wandering around from classroom to classroom where there's different activities going on. And I waited for the explosion from the parents. And by day 2, I had parents writing to me saying, this is fantastic. The children have come home absolutely buzzing with what they're doing. It was a risk. I was a middle class area. So there was always that risk of, but you're not doing enough maths. But the response from the parents particularly was fantastic.
I think you'll win parents over. If children are going home and talking about school and what they've done, then you'll win parents over, because they'll see that the children are actually interested. I mean, you, as you know, you can't do art every week of the year and it work, but actually putting in those things that inspire the children, get the children excited, the parents will then see that the learning comes on the back of it as well. So it's a win-win.
It's quite interesting when I work with schools with Tagtivate, and I go in and do an activity day and do an after-school training session, and then the message on Twitter will filter through, and quite often I'll get a parent following me, as in following Tagtivate on Twitter. Then they'll send me a DM and just say the difference that approach has made to their child. And likewise, it's, when you're working with kids and teachers, so quite often the teacher, when I'm co-delivering a session, the teacher will say, I never knew he could do that. And you'll go, well, why not? You've been teaching for like a term and a half. And he'll say, well, he's never written it in his maths book. He's never put his hand up in the maths lesson. But by taking the learning beyond the classroom wall, whether or not it's into the hall or onto the playground, it works and it clicks. And there's one quote from a child called Ethan, who was in Leicester. And at the end of the session, he came up to me and the coach from Leicester City Football Foundation, sweat dripping, massive smile on his face, and he just said, I used to think I was rubbish at maths, but now I know I'm not. And that was him just demonstrating that sitting down wasn't for him. I'm not saying it's sitting down or running around, but it's trying to get that balance. It's not binary. It's a case of combining the movement and the sitting, because we do need to sit down to reflect. We do need to sit down to write. But as I say, it's not one or the other, it's both combined.
It's opportunity, isn't it? It's creating a culture where there is opportunity for all learners to learn in a way that works for them.
And all of that, folks, is in that book. And it cost me, I think, about £16. But I'm sure you can get it from bookshop, all those online places as well. So it's well worth the read. And I have to say credit to you as well, Bryn, is that it's written in a very sort of not academic style. I mean, it's a practically written book. It's easy to sort of dip into it as well. So I'm not suggesting you're not an academic, but
it is an academic book. Sorry, it's a practical book, but it's backed by research. And so we had Dr. Anna Chalkley, and she checked every single research point that we'd done and modified it in terms of more recent research. We had a wonderful foreword from Dr. Andy Daly-Smith. And again, the research is there. Anna Chalkley keeps on talking about being a pracademic. And I think that's what that blend of research and practice that we need to get over the line.
Brilliant. Well, I certainly recommend people just having a look, delving into it. And if you want to know more, then these two gents are out there. So there is a website, is there, for Tactivate 8?
There is a moves there is a website for Move and Learn, moveandlearn.co.uk. That's being relaunched, and there's also a website for Tactivate, TAGTIV number 8.com, tactive8.com.
Right. Well, we've got one final thing to do, and that's I guess put something in room 101. We'll go to Bryn first, I think. Bryn, have you thought about what you'd put in room 101?
Again, I was tempted by going down the political route of power, corruption, and lies, but then that I might have offended people who like New Order. But I'm going to go for Pritt sticks. Well, not just Pritt sticks, but any glue stick. What is the point? Okay, that's one on its own. But why do we have to print, photocopy a worksheet times 30, do the worksheet, and then stick it into an exercise book?
I know.
Yeah, we're delivering, we can develop fine motor skills, blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, what a waste of time, resources, and we do it purely to show evidence. Well, to me, the evidence can be created in different ways. So no offense against the guys at Pritt sticks, but really, let's try and do something a little bit different, a little bit better.
Yeah, I agree.
That's currency in most primary schools.
Right, Alan, what's your room 101?
I was tempted to back that up and say photocopiers.
Yes.
I'm going to avoid that because it's something I thought I would mention if we didn't bring it up in the conversation. Mine, which is probably will be considered controversial a little bit by some people, but I would want to get rid of summative assessment in the foundation subjects.
Right.
Because I have a real issue with us labelling children as at the expected standard in all the different subjects, particularly art, music. How can you tell a 6-year-old he's at the expected standard in music and art or history? He's the best historian, the one who knows the most facts because they've sat and absorbed them and listened? Or is it the child at the back of the classroom rummaging through everything and trying to find out what it is? So yeah, I would just get rid of those. I think if you want something to justify it, I think I mentioned this to you before, Frank, in conversation. My best example of this is a child we had in Leeds who wasn't working according to the national curriculum at the expected standard in PE because he couldn't swim, he was scared of water, and he wasn't very good in team game situations. He couldn't work well as part of a team. And the main reason for that was because he was an individual and he was on the Olympic gymnastics program. So he was an elite athlete who didn't meet the expectations for PE. So rather than, having this cross every child are they expected, we should be identifying talent, we should be pulling that talent, signposting it, giving it opportunities, and just focus on making children good learners and enjoying learning.
Well, that's
get rid of summative assessment.
That's a good way to end it, isn't it? So thank you so much, gents, for this. And it's been it's been an unusual Sunday morning because we don't normally do the recording on a Sunday morning. So thanks for being flexible with this. And for colleagues who are watching and listening, we'll be back we're going down the environmental route next week. Stan, you're not here, are you?
No, I'm not.
So we have a guest presenter. So Susan Brickell is coming on next week, and we're going to be talking to a guy who started as a landscape architect but has been working more with schools now about the green agenda and how schools when they're built, need to be mindful of the challenges that the environment's going to present to us going forward. So Nick Atherton will be joining us next week. But thanks a lot, and hopefully we'll see all being well, we'll see Stan and me next week, and have a great week, everybody.
Thank you.